Hello everyone. I'm doing a video so that I can drill down a little bit on the context of learning and hopefully add just a little bit of insight on planning for instruction with the student in mind. And so I want to start out with just a brief, just a little refresher of the teacher's job. And I know that you've been through this in all of the courses that you've had this summer, but really core to the teacher's job is the students, building relationships with the students, and designing learning experiences that are going to engage the learners. Now, this is a pretty monumental task, especially because of the sheer numbers of students that you're going to be dealing with on on a daily basis across the semester or across a school year. So I want you to think about, let's say you're going to be either a middle school or a high school teacher. You probably have at least 6 courses a day, probably an average of 28 students. And once you multiply that all out, you're looking at around 150 students per day. And some of you who are going to be elementary teachers, I know you're probably going, glad that's not me. Well, yeah, you're probably going to have a homeroom with, an average of 28 students. And a lot of elementary schools do switch for reading, switch for math, and a lot of them are switching for science now too. So that's 3 additional groups of students that you're going to need to get to know. And so that puts you up over 100 per day as well. And that pales in comparison to our friends who are going to be going into music, art, PE. Y'all, you've got a wow, big job ahead of you. So, for example, Lincoln Elementary School, that's just a couple blocks down the road from me here. There's 1 music teacher for the entire building. That's 355 students. There's 1 art teacher, 355 students. And you better believe that both the art teacher and the music teacher know their students extremely well. Absolutely phenomenal teachers. There are also, last I knew, there were 2 PE teachers at the school. And so that's 355 divided by 2. So lots of students to get to know, lots of information to keep straight. And that's why I assigned you to create a table, because I wanted you to start thinking about not only what information do you need to collect, but how do you need to collect it so that you can actually access it again. I want you to remember that you're not going to just be, sitting down with your files and then planning instruction, with the files. These are the documents. This is information you're going to need to access and be able to, look at, find the information that you want in a moment's notice. Things happen fast in our schools. So, for example, let's say that you have a student, let's say you're an elementary teacher, and you have a student in your class who is involved in a behavior incident on the playground. When the principal lets you know that this happened, they're probably going to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about whether you've seen that behavior before? And that's where the documentation that you keep on your students is going to come in very handy. Now, methods of documentation, record keeping, all of those sorts of things, those aren't directly taught in your teacher education program, at least not usually. So these are things that I bring in so that you can start thinking about it. You're going to be involved with your students in a variety of contexts, before school, after school, lunch, hallway, when they have behavior incidents. You'll probably have extracurricular activities that you're responsible for. There's probably going to be special events that you chaperone or you're involved with. All of those. Those are not only, situations where some advanced preparation and knowing who's going to be there and, being aware of the students and what sorts of needs they may have is going to be really important. But also, if you have some students that you're having a very difficult time at getting to know, being able to take a look at at your record keeping system prior to when you're going to run into them in the hallway or at lunch, it can help jog your memory so that you can bring in important information. Anyways, the most routine way that this record keeping or documentation is applied is, as I said previously, in unit and lesson plan design. And it's really important that we think about our students from a variety of different perspectives when we're designing instruction. And probably the most commonly thought of thing that we absolutely have to think about is, what we expect students to know and be able to do at the conclusion of the lesson or the unit. These are the objectives, or what's referred to as the student learning outcomes, the SLOs. And you also need to be extremely aware of the students in your classes who have individualized education plans or IEPs. Some of your students may be on a 504 plan. Those are things that if you don't recall, you need to go back to your Spec Ed 205 course. Those are two concepts that were talked about in great detail. But I want you to understand that students who have an IEP or even a 504 may have really unique learning outcomes that are, shades different than the learning outcomes that are specified for the entire classroom. So the differences in the learning outcomes or in the processes of learning are spelled out in the IEP, and the IEP will help you know what sorts of modifications you need to make to the lesson in order to accommodate the student and meeting their needs. And oftentimes, but not always, oftentimes, one of the areas that we work on modifying is the level of instruction. So the level of instruction, and this is key for student-centered learning in general. We need to know where our students are at in order for us to be able to, take them where we need them to go. And so a selection of learning materials should be based upon the needs of our students. So it's important to do some sort of pre-assessment or pre-evaluation before you begin instruction. However, the level of instruction isn't just about the reading level or the achievement level or whatever of the learning materials. It's also about, the pacing of your instruction. It's about the level of monitoring their instruction and the techniques that you're going to use to check for progress towards learning and then progress towards mastery. And those are referred to as formative assessments. Your end of unit assessments are your summative expectations. One of the things that we don't commonly think about as we're planning instruction, but we should, because this is where we can get really sidetracked. So when we're planning instruction, we need to also think about what expectations we have for the students in terms of self-regulation, behavior, attendance, attention, self-directedness, executive functioning, all of those sorts of things. So what levels of expectations do we have, or are we assuming by the instructional methods that we choose? For example, when I lecture, I'm making some assumptions about what I believe students should be able to do. When I lecture, I'm saying straight out, well, my expectation is that you're going to be able to listen to me for as long as I'm lecturing. That's what I expect of you. And if you're off task, you're off task. Well, is that really true? When I plan to do some sort of a lecture or some sort of directed instruction, and I don't sit down first and think about, are there any students in my class that are going to have a difficult time if I talk at them for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes, for half an hour? What about another example? Let's say I'm going to have students engage in a literacy circle, or they have to discuss their reading of a novel that we've selected, right? So my expectation is that students are all going to talk in class. I wonder if making that assumption is excluding anybody. When I say to my students, okay, I'm going to give you the next 3 days to work on this project, and I'm going to check on you tomorrow. I'm making an assumption that all of the students in my classes are self-directed enough to get started and have the self-regulation necessary to stay on task and follow through. Well, is that the case for all of my students? I brought in 3 examples from our classroom sim, and I want to walk through some of this with you. The first one is Kelso, and I'm not going to read the character sketch, and I'm not going to go through a lot of the details here, but I've posted some things up at the top. He has learning disabilities. He's been diagnosed with ADD, interchangeably also called ADHD, as well as dyslexia. His parents have been receiving a great deal of pressure to medicate their son, and that's not something that the mom is at all open to. There's some indication that there may be, his family might be more of a, it might be a little bit on the rowdy side, and the teachers, other teachers in the school, feel that they might not be so positive. But I really don't know that. That feels a whole lot like gossip to me. They say that the other teachers in the school say that he's very nice, that he's very polite, he can be charming. He doesn't really care too much about his academics, and he's got below average grades. And, you know, he doesn't complete his homework, doesn't study for tests. He doesn't really have much to say in class discussions, but he is very social. So one of the things I want to point out here is that most of what is contained in that very first paragraph rarely completes his homework. He admits to not studying. Very social. He'd rather socialize with his peers than working on his assignment. Some of that can definitely be attributed to learning disabilities. I want you to think about what you know about attention deficit disorder. ADD is something that, there are quite a few teachers that don't even believe that it's a real learning disability. And when students forget their homework on a regular basis, demonstrate poor organization skills, have issues with impulsivity, can't stay on task in the classroom, find themselves doing something other than what they're supposed to be doing in the classroom. Most of the time, teachers will look at those behaviors and attribute them to willfulness. And what really exacerbates the situation is that teachers will see a kid with ADD one day doing pretty well, and the next day can't stay organized, can't stay on task, can't focus, can't hold their body in one place for very long. And then teachers will say things like, well, they did really well yesterday, so obviously today they're just not behaving. What oftentimes people with ADD will hear their teachers say is that they're not living up to their potential, that they just need to apply themselves, they need to buckle down, all of those sorts of things. You are going to have students with attention deficit disorder in your classes, and it's going to be very perplexing to you and even more so to your students with ADD. I know this because I have ADD and dyslexia, and I spent my entire early childhood, all the way up until college, actually, with these sorts of situations where, my teachers basically attributed my behaviors to willful incompliance, and it was very, very difficult, and it was very difficult on my academic self-esteem as well. And I see a lot of students who have ADD, especially the ADD and dyslexia combination, who suffer from very, very low academic self-esteem. And that's a shame. That is an absolute shame. Our brains are wired differently. We are not neurotypical. And because this is going to be something that it's going to be prominent in your classrooms, you need to really take the time to understand what ADD is. And I don't mean talking to other teachers. I mean, find out from credible sources. There's one of the most accessible and I find just amazing resources is it's called Attitude, ADD, Etude.com. And there's a ton of information in there. If you're interested, let me know. I'll connect you. But those are some of the things that, as a teacher, I would definitely be picking up on. Here, Allison. Now I brought Allison in because a lot of you who went through her profile, you didn't really see a whole lot here. You saw that she is interested in the arts, maybe. Didn't quite know what to do with that. Yeah, some of you brought out social anxiety and all of that. Good. There are a couple of other things that I just absolutely have to bring to the forefront. Okay, so first of all, for me, is that her parents have recently gone through a divorce, and she's recently been diagnosed with a social anxiety disorder. And so that needs to be right at the forefront of what I'm thinking, and sort of the lens that I'm using to look at Allison and try and figure out how I can reach out to her. One of the symptoms, if you will, of the divorce and the transition because of the divorce is that she's spending part of the week at one parent and part of the week at another. I don't know about you, but when when I'm having to go, just away for the weekend or whatever, and then I'm coming back the night before, I have to be in class or whatever, that's unsettling. So I want you to think about the realities of this continual midweek transition, the back and forth, and what sort of an impact that has on students. Also, I want you to be thinking about this, that she doesn't even live in her dad doesn't live in the district. She has to commute. She has to use the bus. All of that. So there are a lot of things going on here that she's having to figure out. So, if she's going to be late, I need to be thinking about, if I have her first hour and, I can't count on her being there, I may not, introduce a new unit or introduce a new concept or whatever right off in the morning. I might wait until halfway through the class period. And to be honest, if I'm teaching a first hour course, I'm probably going to do that because I've worked with high schoolers and I know what mornings are like. But also, some of you picked up on the idea here that she likes to read and all of that. And one of the things that oftentimes new teachers will pick up on is, oh, the student really likes to read. And so like in an English class, oh, she likes to read. And that she's done the reading. And so you call on her. So remember, up here, she is quite shy and does not like to be called upon to speak in class. So that's one of the other things that I want you to be thinking about, that when we have class discussions, and you're expecting everyone to say something or, participate in the discussion, I want you to think about who you're excluding from that discussion, because there are a lot of students like Allison who do not feel comfortable participating in class, saying what they think out loud. Now, that may be one of your goals for the class, that you want to help everybody develop the ability to speak in class. But that's not just about the student. That's also about the classroom environment that you create. First comes creating a safe learning space where Allison feels comfortable just being in the classroom, And then maybe it's you and Allison having a conversation. You have to figure out what progress looks like for her. This is what I mean when I say you have to think about where your students are at and then how you're going to get them where you want them to go. The next one is Clarice. Clarice was one that I was really surprised that I didn't see a whole lot of information from the students who are from those of you who had her as a student. And so, first of all, right up at the top, she's African American. You can say that. It's okay to say that. She is African American. You can also say that she is a student who comes from low-income, single-parent family, and there are financial challenges. Now, I'm not quite sure here, but I question whether or not there might be some economic trauma here. Not real sure, but I'm going to definitely keep my eyes open for that. But what is really standing out for me is that there's this combination of frequent absences, bullying in school and at home, and I'm wondering how that's affecting her. I'm wondering if she is suffering from the effects of trauma. When I see in the case notes that there's a social worker who's visiting monthly, I know that there's got to be some significant issues going on here. And all of that, along with the fact that she has learning disabilities, diagnosed with a reading disability. She misses a lot of school, and she is extremely credit deficient. So one of the things that I'm going to think about here, and this is controversial, but I have spent decades working with students who are considered high risk, students who are at high risk for not graduating, students who are at high risk for for not graduating. Anyways, most school districts have special programs that work with their students who are severely credit deficient and who have social, behavioral, academic needs that surpass those that can be met in the regular classroom. One of the school districts that I worked with, Beloit School District, I worked with their alternative education program there, and worked with students who were very much like Clarice, also referred to as Precious. We would work with them, and depending on their level of participation, we could get them back up to, at least within a reasonable credit range with their peers within a year, possibly two. But these programs are very specialized in credit recovery, and also oftentimes will provide a great deal of support, family support, and also education of course, education, school is education, right? But mental health education and personal growth and development information that can help students who need some extra assistance overcome the kinds of challenges that they might be facing. So as Clarice comes into my class, I'm going to be already aware of all of the services that my district can provide in terms of not only services at my school, such as, the guidance counselor and the school psychiatrist and that, but I'm also going to be aware of any alternative schools in the district, any charter schools in the district. And by the way, charter schools, the way that they're done around here, they're freaking awesome. They're absolutely awesome. The charter schools in the Janesville School District, my son went to Taos Leadership Academy, fabulous. Yes, in some of the other states, charter schools are not doing what they're supposed to do. Here, we've got amazing charter schools. And Clarice might have been a really good candidate for one of them. So anyways, that's some of the stuff that I wanted you to be thinking about as you were working through those student profiles. And really what I'm talking about is a concept called differentiation. And I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to pick up with differentiation in part 2.